April 26, 1986, 1:23 a.m., a moment that would be etched into the annals of history. A quiet night in Pripyat, Ukraine, shattered by an unimaginable force. Reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant explodes, tearing open the night sky with an eerie blue light. The explosion was so powerful that it could be seen miles away, a harbinger of the devastation to come. It was a disaster unlike any the world had ever seen, a catastrophe that would forever alter the course of history. The once bustling plant was now a smouldering ruin, a testament to human error and hubris. The explosion, a violent expulsion of radioactive material, released a plume of deadly isotopes into the atmosphere. Carried by the wind across borders and continents, this invisible menace would affect countless lives, spreading silent death far and wide. The world watched in horror as images of the burning reactor flickered across television screens. News anchors struggled to convey the magnitude of the disaster, their voices tinged with fear and uncertainty. But the full extent of the disaster, the invisible enemy of radiation, remained shrouded in secrecy. The silent killer, radiation, was an enigma to many, its effects both immediate and long-lasting. The Soviet Union, in the grip of a system that prized control above all else, chose silence over truth, a decision that would have devastating consequences for millions. The government's initial response was to downplay the severity, a tragic miscalculation that would haunt them for years to come. In the immediate aftermath of the explosion, confusion reigned. Soviet authorities, fearing panic and international condemnation, downplayed the severity of the disaster. The official narrative minimized the danger, assuring citizens that the situation was under control. Evacuation orders for nearby Pripyat, home to over 49,000 people, were delayed for 36 critical hours. Those living in the shadow of the burning reactor went about their day, unaware of the invisible threat raining down upon them. Children played in parks, their laughter a cruel counterpoint to the silent killer in the air. The delayed evacuation exposed countless individuals to dangerous levels of radiation, condemning many to a future shadowed by illness and fear. The invisible enemy, invisible no longer. Radiation, a silent and insidious killer, began to wreak havoc on the health of those exposed. The immediate impact was evident on the first responders, the firefighters and plant workers who heroically rushed to contain the disaster. Many suffered from acute radiation sickness, a brutal illness marked by vomiting, hair loss, and skin lesions. But the long-term consequences of radiation exposure were far more insidious. The incidence of thyroid cancer, particularly in children, skyrocketed in the years following the disaster. Other cancers, respiratory illnesses, and birth defects became grim reminders of the invisible enemy that continued to cast a long shadow over the region. The Chernobyl disaster was not simply an accident, it was a tragedy waiting to happen. The RBMK-1000 reactor, a Soviet design, was inherently flawed, lacking crucial safety features common in Western reactors. Its design prioritized plutonium production over safety, a dangerous compromise that ultimately proved fatal. The reactor's positive void coefficient, a design quirk that made it unstable at low power, contributed to the uncontrolled chain reaction. Furthermore, the lack of a robust containment structure, a feature designed to contain a meltdown, meant that the radioactive material was released directly into the atmosphere, amplifying the disaster's impact. Whispers in the shadow, silencing the truth. The Soviet government's instinct to control information, to suppress any narrative that challenged its authority, extended to the scientific community. This was not just a matter of political control, but a deeply ingrained culture of secrecy that permeated every aspect of Soviet life. Researchers studying the long-term health and environmental consequences of the disaster faced censorship and intimidation. They were constantly under surveillance, their work scrutinized, and their findings often dismissed or altered to fit the official narrative. Their findings, often contradicting the official narrative, were suppressed, buried in the archives of a regime that feared truth more than it feared radiation. These archives became a graveyard for inconvenient truths, locked away from the world. This suppression of information had a chilling effect on the scientific community, hindering efforts to fully understand the disaster's impact and develop effective mitigation strategies. Scientists were left demoralized, their research stifled, and their voices silenced. The world was left in the dark, grappling with the consequences of a disaster whose true extent remained hidden behind a wall of secrecy. The silence was deafening, and the truth buried deep continued to haunt those who sought it. A world on edge. The global impact of Soviet secrecy. The Chernobyl disaster, a tragedy born of secrecy and compounded by lies, sent shockwaves across the globe. The world watched in horror as the invisible enemy crossed borders carried by wind and rain. The Soviet Union's initial attempts to conceal the disaster's true extent eroded international trust and fueled fears about the safety of nuclear power. The disaster forced a global reckoning with the risk inherent in nuclear technology. It exposed the vulnerabilities of a system reliant on secrecy and control, highlighting the need for international cooperation and transparency in the face of such catastrophic events. The courage to remember lessons from Chernobyl's ashes. Chernobyl stands as a stark reminder of the human cost of secrecy and the importance of transparency in the face of disaster. The abandoned buildings and deserted streets of Pripyat echo the silence that once shrouded the truth. It teaches us that truth, however painful, is the only foundation upon which to build a safer future. The tireless efforts of scientists and cleanup workers highlight the ongoing struggle to mitigate the disaster's impact. The stories of Chernobyl, the voices of those who lived through the disaster and its aftermath, must be heard. These personal accounts provide invaluable insights into the human experience of such a catastrophic event. Their courage to remember, to bear witness to the truth, serves as a powerful antidote to the poison of silence. Commemorative events and vigils keep the memory of the victims alive and remind us of the importance of vigilance. Chernobyl's legacy, etched in the ruins of a city and the lives forever scarred by radiation, compels us to embrace transparency, accountability, and a shared commitment to a safer, more sustainable future. The haunting images of overgrown buildings and radiation warning signs serve as a stark warning to future generations. The unseen scars long-term health consequences. The spectre of Chernobyl continues to haunt the region, the invisible enemy leaving its mark on generations. The long-term health consequences of radiation exposure are a grim legacy of the disaster. While the initial death toll remains a subject of debate, the true impact on human health unfolds slowly, insidiously, over decades. Thyroid cancer, a rare disease before Chernobyl, became tragically commonplace in the years following the disaster, particularly among children and adolescents. The increased incidence of other cancers, respiratory illnesses, and autoimmune disorders paints a grim picture of the long-term health consequences of radiation exposure. A legacy of lies, the human cost of deception. The Soviet government's decision to prioritize control over transparency came at a heavy human cost. The delayed evacuation of Pripyat, the suppression of information about the disaster's true extent, and the censorship of scientific research all contributed to a climate of fear, uncertainty, and mistrust. The government's actions amplified the disaster's impact, turning a preventable catastrophe into a profound human tragedy. The legacy of lies and deception continues to cast a long shadow over the region, eroding trust in institutions and hindering efforts to provide comprehensive healthcare and support to those affected by the disaster. Breaking the silence, voices from the zone. Despite the official silence, the voices of Chernobyl refuse to be silenced. Writers, journalists, and filmmakers, many of whom risked their own safety, sought to document the disaster's human toll, to give voice to those who had been silenced. Svetlana Alexievich's haunting masterpiece, Voices from Chernobyl, stands as a testament to the power of individual stories to challenge official narratives and reveal the human face of tragedy. These voices, filled with pain, resilience, and a fierce determination to bear witness to the truth, broke through the wall of silence, forcing the world to confront the human cost of Chernobyl and the enduring legacy of the disaster. Transparency, the antidote to disaster. Chernobyl stands as a stark reminder of the critical importance of transparency in preventing and responding to disasters. Open communication, timely and accurate information, and a commitment to accountability are essential for building trust, fostering cooperation, and mitigating the impact of such catastrophic events. The lessons learned from Chernobyl extend far beyond the realm of nuclear power. They serve as a call to action for governments, industries, and individuals alike to prioritize transparency, embrace accountability, and work collectively to create a safer and more sustainable